Today we'll be executing the design plan from the last video. Alright, so as you can see, I have this crazy mess of papers, and I have 3 sheets, 2.5 basically, and these 3 sheets are showing all the individual wires that are raw that I have to connect to something. And then once I figure out what that is, then I can look up here and find out what color and all that stuff. And the one thing that I haven't done, which would make maybe life easier, and I'm not sure if I'll need to, but right now it shows each system and then what that wire goes to. And so, for instance, let's say you have a system here that needs a switched power, and this system needs a switched power, and this system needs a switched power. Well, maybe they could be all in the same switched power. So what I haven't done is created a sheet that says switch power, and then all these wires need to be connected to it. That might make life easier, but this might all become like, instant figuring it out, like physically when I'm in the car, like, oh, here's this one, I'm going to set that here, and it goes through. So I'm just kind of commenting a little bit because it's a lot. And then I have like 2 sheets of optional questions and answers and stuff from tech support and things like that. But and then what was really interesting is I was having a conversation with somebody at Holley Performance, and they were saying, well, this wire goes to your, AC relay and all that stuff. And I'm looking at my diagram here and I'm like, I don't have an AC relay. The power is just a switch. But then I realized after the fact, this is kind of funny, is I decided I wanted to put in a push switch and not have a stupid looking toggle on my center console. Well, since I'm using a push switch, I have to use a relay. And so I've already spec'd out a relay for this system, but it's not in the diagram. So I'm on tech support talking to the guy and I'm like, no, I don't see anything. And so it just there's just so much stuff going on. You can see, that's, I don't know, 50 wires or so. That's a lot. So, there's just so much my brain's like holding in, but I'm going to try to take these sheets and some of these manuals and go out to the car and actually start kind of triaging and grouping these wires to certain areas and seeing if it all starts to make sense or if it just becomes one big cluster. So that's what we're going to try to do. That's technically not right. Technically, we got the sensor, the engine goes to Ron Francis, sending unit. Gray, low pressure, harness. Water temp. Water temp goes to RFSU. Blue, deep blue. RPM tack. Dash harness, purple tack. Yeah, okay. Speed, Holley electric fan. That's speed, right? Dash harness, radio memory, volts. So, I think this might be automatic. Wire number one. So one of the issues that I'm kind of running into is right now this wiring setup is kind of temporary. Once I take the body off to get painted, I'm going to go through and kind of re-tighten it all up because I'm just having a lot of hard time. You know, there's not a lot of room to get stuff permanently in here. And you got to remember, I got to get the trans tunnel in. So because all this stuff's coiled up, not that there's much room for it to move anywhere, but I might be able to move it 8 inches some different area or whatever. And since everything's coiled up, because it's the only way to get it to fit in, if I start soldering and putting all these wires together permanently, when I go to rewire this, I pretty much have to redo all those things because it's going to be all tangled up. So what I might do is actually give myself a way out with some connectors. So I could solder a bunch of stuff, but then give me one connector where I could just disconnect it, unravel a bunch of stuff, connect it back in, and I'm good. So that's what I'm pondering right at this moment, and I might do that. Now, some of these power wires, they're worried about feedback going into the power system. And so, for instance, I have a trans power switched and I have a ECU power switched. And if the trans is on the same line, which let's just consider it at this point, the whole car is the same line as far as I'm concerned. The power could backfeed from the trans harness into the ECU harness, and then the system will never turn off and the engine won't turn off. So, they talk about using relays and things like that, but this line already has a relay on it. So my only option is really to use a diode, and a diode just forces energy only to go in one direction. So if I take my powered line and I put a diode on it facing the switched power input, then when the system turns off, that energy can't come back through the diode the opposite direction and keep powering stuff. So that's what I'm going to actually do. And but I'm just giving myself a way out once I untangle all this wire again. And the other thing is I never expected to take harnesses apart and shorten things and do stuff like that. I just figured, hey, this is all plug and play. I'm going to just, do all that and just shove a loom of wire in the dash and I'm good to go. And you've already seen that I've taken 2 harnesses apart and shorten it and get rid of it because it's just 6 feet of extra cable I don't need. The other thing that was kind of nice about that is I was able to take apart some areas where I see that 1 ground wire turned into 3. And I wanted to see, well, what do the experts do at Ron Francis or Holley and see how they put it all together. And basically it's just soldered with heat shrink. So, which is what I was kind of expecting, but now I have verification. So, and I have a background in electronics, but not for cars. And so everything's like the opposite. Everything's, switching grounds instead of switching positives, which is totally foreign to me. It's like, what? I'm used to, tapping into wires, but I'm not used to actually wiring or rewiring a whole car. So it's been kind of interesting, but now I will say that after 2 weeks of racking my brain, a bunch of conversations, seeing what options are out there in the sense of parts and wire harnesses and different things, relays, how relays work, all that kind of stuff, I'm finally feeling comfortable and able to just dig in and not really worry about it too much. The only thing I'm worried about at this point, again, is when I go to untangle all this and tighten it up even more, am I screwing myself by permanently crimping stuff together? Now, if I crimp something, okay, I cut the wire, I shorten it an extra inch, and I re-crimp it with a new thing, no big deal. But right now I'm getting ready to solder in a diode, and it's like, well, I don't want to re-solder a diode and re-shrink wrap and all that stuff. So what if I just give myself an out with a connection that I can, like a spade or something, inline spade that I could take apart. So I think that's what I'm going to do on this one. But here we go. Okay, so I want to kind of go through designing a system just so you get an idea of what it takes for people that don't know about, electricity and have never done stuff like this before. For me, I have electrical engineering background. However, car stuff is just totally backwards, so I have to think a lot. And, plus it's been many years since I've been out of college. And I don't do that stuff as a daily basis for my normal job for the last 20, 30 years. But I love the information that, the scientific method approach and everything that I've had. So let's say we want to deal with the courtesy light. Let me just show you what's going on. The courtesy light has two wires coming to it. And if we trace this wire, we have red courtesy light, which is coming out of our power. So that power is coming out, and this whole side is live at all times. This is only when the AC is on, which means your keys, switched over one. And then this one is only when the ignition feed and when the car is actually on. So we'll go back here. We got red hot wire coming out, goes to the light. And then there's a gray, what we'll call the ground, if you will. It comes all the way over and it goes to the headlight switch. So what does that mean? That means that, I'm just going to put courtesy light. So here's our diagram. We have, we'll call it 12 volt power coming in. And that's going to go straight to your LED light. And there's two LED lights, one for each floorboard, if you will. And so there's your hot power coming in. Now, what you do is you connect the negative together, and then you go connect it to the headlight switch. And when you flip the button, the headlight switch will go to ground, and that's a symbol for ground. So in other words, when this is not attached, and this is floating in the wind, if you will, it's not attached to anything, power is sitting here on these lights, but they're not going to be on until this gets fully connected to ground, and then you have a complete circuit. So the other thing that I want to do is I want to have it to where the courtesy lights come on when the door opens. Well, how do we do that? Well, it's really simple. We tap off of here, we go to a switch, and then that switch goes to ground. And then we do the same thing. We come over here, we go to a switch, and it goes to ground. And so when the door is closed physically, this stays open. When the door opens, this connects, and it doesn't matter if this is on or not. In other words, it's not on. This is going to close the gap. So instead of this is going to be powered through here and come through this switch, come through here, come through that switch. They could both be open. This could be on too. But one of these three have to be connected, and this system will be on. All of them have to be disconnected for this to be off. So I'm not sure if that's making sense. It's a little bit hard to do this when I'm in my garage and just on a workbench kind of showing you this stuff. But, and so therefore, when the switch is pushed in, it's open. When the switch is not pushed in, it's closed. And so what do I mean by that? That means that you physically put a switch in the door, and when the door physically closes, it pushes the switch in. So that's what I mean by that. So this little drawing here equals this physically in the car. Now, let's say I want to complicate this even more. Hey, I want the courtesy lights to come on when I unlock my doors, just like modern cars. Well, I'm not going to draw that for you, but here we go. Now we're looking at a relay system, and you have to use a 5-pin relay, and you have to figure out how that's going to be connected with an extra 5 wires. Would that be per door? No, probably wouldn't have to be per door, just be for the wireless unit, to now also be connected to this, relay. Of course, 5 extra wires coming off that. But the trigger being, it grounds it out and hops into that circuit. So you could have multiple ways of doing that. And again, just start stacking up the wires. And with this car, where are you gonna put it? There's nowhere to put anything. I mean, the only space you have left is on this little ledge by the gas tank, which of course I don't like the sound of wires and gas tank. That doesn't make me feel too good. But with the tunnel, my center console, the bench seat, there's no space in this car. So if you don't have air conditioning, a long time ago, I had a powwow with the camera, and I told you guys, I said, if you're on the fence whether you're putting an HVAC system in this car, think wisely, because you could see that took up, 1-2 square foot of space. I would have plenty of room for my cables if I didn't have that system. All my wiring would be less. I would have see how much wiring is going to the ignition switch right there? It's just a ton of wiring. When you put in the heater, you're going to have 3 switches with that much wiring going to each one. It's that crazy. And so this really becomes the big bully in the room, stealing all your space, adding tons of wires. Now, I personally want to have air conditioning and heating. So, I have to have it. But let's say I was building, a Cobra or something like that. It's open. Yeah, it's Arizona. It might be really chilly at night when you're driving home and you'd love to have heater on your legs at least while you're cruising. No doubt, it'd be awesome. But if you just wanted to build a car really fast and not worry about a lot of stuff, that would take a lot off your plate. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of what it takes, and then add that to each single circuit of what you're doing and making diagrams like this, which is kind of what I'm doing here. All right, so I've actually gotten a decent amount accomplished. What you can see here, these are all the individual wires that I need to connect, and here is all the individual wires I need to connect, and here is all the individual wires I need to connect. Now, everything with a dot next to it is something that I've officially connected. So, for instance, electric fan 1, this is coming out of the Holley EFI harness. It needs to go to the thermo switch. The thermo switch is located in the Ron Francis harness, which is the main harness that came with the car. The sending harness version of it. So let's go over here to our wiring diagram, and here's our sending units. And then if you come over here, we're looking for fan thermo switch. And the fan thermo switch comes across here, boom, 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 and comes up here and goes to the actual relay to turn on the fan. So that's one that needs to go there, but also the blue dryer needs to go there, which you can see this is for the air conditioning system. So that needs to go to the fan thermo switch. And so we have 2 systems that need to go to the actual trigger wire for that. So let me show you what that is. Once we come into the car, we go, okay, here's the green trigger switch wire. Here's coming from the Holley harness, which I didn't have written down what the colors were, so I have to look at the chart, see what color it is. And then also here's the blue dryer switch. So that's probably going to be in a harness later, which is why I put this connector on here. And so that wire is coming out of here, which is going to go here later on. But right now I just have a stream of cables laying on the ground. Now you can see this is a raw cable coming out, and that's going to go to a WaterSense temperature, which I haven't bought yet, that's gonna go here. And there's a ground wire that needs to go here too, which I haven't made up yet. So, that's just one out of 50. And so I've actually cut a decent amount of wires out of certain harnesses. That's just some of it. Then, besides the wire harness at the very bottom, there's a bunch of wire, a bunch of cover that I've taken off so far. So, and I still have a few wires that are coming out that need to go somewhere later, which I don't even know what they are yet. But it's pretty crazy. For the most part, I got a lot of stuff, and I jammed the CPU in there, and I Velcroed the cable up against the wall as best I could. Again, this is going to be temporary. I'm going to drive it this way for a while, get all the kinks worked out, and then once the body goes to paint, I'm going to go ahead and try to tighten this up, because I just can't do anything with the body in the car. It's kind of difficult. But since the doors are lined and everything's in shape, ready to do body work, I ain't touching it. So right now there's 3 permanently hot wires that need to go to the battery. There's also about 3 or 4 ground wires that need to be connected. And so I'm thinking about a distribution block. And so I need to make up a list of what's going to be on the distribution block. Now, as you can see, there is a set of cables coming down, and that also has your radio memory, your switched power for the radio, all sorts of stuff like that. And it also has the heater. And so we're probably looking at here, brown radio power, memory, wiper, which I don't have wipers, so that's a free line for me to use, and the heater switch. And I think all those might actually go onto a distribution block, because then I could tap off of that for my power windows or for my courtesy lights in a sense. Well, not necessarily courtesy lights. They have their own cable. So it's a lot. It's just a lot. And I'm getting through it, but it took a week of, hitting my head against the wall, and then finally creating all these sheets, and then finally going in there and implementing some of it. And then I also went to the store, and I got a bunch of different connectors. So, and what I never really noticed, even though I've owned this tool for probably 30 years, as you can see that it's color coded. So the red is for the red, blue for the blue. And you can see some yellows in there. There's a yellow in there. And so when you go to crimp, if you're doing insulated crimps, you're doing the round area. If you're doing a non-insulated crimp, which would be right there, see how there's no insulation on that? Then you use these where it really gets in there. If you use this on the regular insulated crimps, you could poke a hole in it, and then therefore it's not technically insulated all the way around, even though that little divot is way sucked in. So, and then I got some diodes, and so that was the other thing is I actually ended up putting a diode right into that splice right in the center there, and then Hinch shrinked it for that backfeed. So it probably sounds like I'm just jumping around, but like it's so much stuff, that's pretty much what's going on. Like it's just a lot of stuff. And then, once I get that tightened up, I have a whole nother mess of wires back here, the battery, all that kind of stuff. So, but it's coming together. And then I have one more wire here that I'm not going to use the oil sense temperature for the Holley system. I'm going to pull this off, get a pigtail for this, tap it onto here with a ground, and have that go straight to my meters in my dashboard. So, and the other thing I wanted to show you is for the air conditioning system, you have this basically valve, I guess, with a bunch of hoses going to it. But then you have to get all the wiring, comes to one of these, which I'm assuming is kind of a control relay, if you will. But all these wires have to go either into the dash or into the dryer here. And so like I'm slowly kind of mapping out where this might go to see how much wire I need and how to get around the exhaust pipe. And that's why this one, I put a connector on it because it probably needs to go in a loom with all these cables and then, you know, nicely covered like this one and go through. So I want to be able to do that later so it has a little bit more heat protection and stuff. But yeah, that's a whole nother process. So, but I did finally go through the manual and kind of chunked it down, and I really do kind of understand what's going on now with the air conditioning. And what's interesting is the main system is just a switch to turn it on. And then you have your fan, and then you have your temperature switch. And so a lot of those cables I just showed you coming off that controller, that's the epoxied in controller you saw. Those wires are all for the temperature, and then you got some power stuff. What's interesting is this is off because it's powered by the fan. So once you turn the fan on and you got 3 levels going, which is these 3 outputs, the power over here is always on. Once this is in low, medium, or high, this is always on. This actually comes over and powers this switch, and then the compressor will turn on, knowing that, you know, there's a fan going and stuff's happening to make sure it doesn't, you know, overpower itself or get too much pressure. So, however, I'm ditching this switch, and I'm going to use a relay instead with a push switch. So that now becomes all these wires. And then if you want, and let's say you had a low power engine, you could use the computer controlled AC shutoff and AIC kick. This is kind of your idle. So when the compressor turns on, your idle doesn't go too low. And this is when you're, you know, slamming the gas to the pedal, it will disengage the compressor so you don't overwind the compressor. So this relay would actually be connected to all these, and it seems like a lot. At the end of the day, you got a few relays and you're just tying a few cables together. But when you're mapping it all out, it's kind of crazy. So in my case, these are kind of optional, and I'm not drag racing, I'm not doing anything. And if I am, I'm turning the AC off anyways. I don't really care about that. The idle issue, you know, it's EFI controlled. If the computer notices that it needs more idle, it's going to boost the idle. So for the most part, at least during testing phase, I'm not even doing these. So these are off. And that is that bundle of cable you see over there. That's actually, I left it full length because if I do need it, I'll, you know, open that back up and bring it back out and tie it in. But for now, I'm going without that system, and I'm just going to do the regular on the HVAC and kind of go from there. In fact, what I could do is I could actually put in the rail switch to begin with just for testing phases, and then once I'm done, start actually doing the real stuff afterwards. So that could be fair game. I'd have to verify how much work that is wiring wise to jump back and forth. And then of course there's more stuff for like your wireless, you know, door locks, because I'm having shaved doors, so I need door popper solenoids. I got a light up cup holder. I got a USB charger for my phone. I got courtesy lights. I'm going to have switches in the doors for the courtesy lights. You got your power window switches on and off. There's tons of grounds and tons of power that you have to do, so I'm going to have to make some little looms to connect all that. So today was a great day because I made a big purchase list that I need to buy for certain things, and things have changed since I've done most of this. So I'm going to go in, finalize that list, get my distribution power block, stuff like that, and get that ordered in. And so I might not do any more wire work, which, there's nothing else for me to do except work on wiring. But I might have to wait a few days for that to come in. So again, I apologize that it might seem like I'm like jumping from back and forth, but it's just because there's so much to talk about and it's all over the map. It's just crazy. So this amount of craziness is floating around in my head and just making it, insane to tackle it all at once. But I think we're getting somewhere. So appreciate the time. Glad you're checking all this stuff out, and hope you have a great day.